Yeah, let's just get going then. So, okay, we're investigating losses at ABC College. There's our teammates here, and we'll get into it. Background to the case. So the board of directors for the college voted 10 to 2 in favor of hiring our fraud examination team to help uncover why, despite being apparently in a growth phase, the college has been losing money for about 2 years or so. We had 1 month to conduct our exploratory investigation. This meant limited time and access to data. So our first step, of course, was just to come to campus and do a meet and greet, meet the board members and a few department heads, and just take a tour at campus. We asked to see organizational charts of various departments, the overall organization of the college, financial statements, enrollment numbers, related documents, and data. We'll get into that more. But our initial observations raised immediate red flags for further investigation, therefore, thereby informing our scope of inquiry. And that is, we first, or one thing we wanted to definitely look into was on campus construction because it seemed to be so much of it. Student service delays and dissatisfaction. Well, I'll explain our reasoning for wanting to do that, to talk to like the student service hub or whatever, the call center on campus. We also decided to look into personnel and bureaucratic bloat. And last but definitely not least, maybe the most far-reaching aspect of our investigations was the enrollment anomalies themselves. So, with on-campus construction, again, we saw it right during our initial tour. There was a ton of construction going on, obvious area of inquiry. So the method of investigation followed by our teammate who undertook this investigation or sub-investigation was to review financial statements, project budgets to look for anomalies like cost overruns, vendor inconsistencies, also to focus on key departments like procurement, finance, and project management. The method includes to also gather documents, review contracts, invoices, payroll records, and project timelines for inconsistencies. Also to conduct interviews with stakeholders like construction managers, procurement officers, department heads, and compliance teams. Conduct internal control review by evaluating procurement policies, bidding processes, and budget approval workflow. And of course, to conduct a budgetary analysis, scrutinizing whether the expenses align with the approved budgets, and to note any unexplained increase in project costs. To scrutinize the contracts for favoritism or overpricing, possibly conflicts of interest in vendor selection, and to compare construction progress with work that was billed to uncover overcharges and to investigate resource allocation, such as the use of unaccounted funds in construction material and labor. So the findings uncovered: some projects experienced significant budget overruns without justification. This included inflated charges for materials and labor. When compared to market value with the contract value, we saw a 25% markup in cost, which leads to actually $1 million of losses for the college. There's appeared to be fraudulent billing. Vendors billed for incomplete or non-existent work. For instance, invoices revealed $300,000 was spent on improvement to landscaping, which was never actually done. Several invoices lacked supporting documentation, such as receipts or delivery confirmation. The suspected problem here, another suspected problem, anecdotal evidence uncovered by a teammate, which we'll get to in the next section, suggests conflict of interest. Rumors, and yes, just rumors, that some college officials might have engaged in favoritism while choosing vendors with whom they have personal connections, bypassing competitive bidding, if there was any bidding process at all, and violating procurement policies. So our recommendations for this part of our investigation: implement a mandatory competitive bidding process and an independent review panel to prevent conflicts of interest in project approvals. Mandate periodic project review audits, ideally quarterly, by an independent third party. Introduce real-time budget tracking software such as SAP to flag deviations immediately. conduct anonymous employee surveys to encourage whistleblowing on irregularities and reporting any observed conflicts of interest. In the long run, ABC College should establish an oversight committee to review large-scale project approvals and monitor ongoing projects for compliance with approved budgets and timelines. So another area that we looked into, student service delays and dissatisfaction, when students call in needing help with this, that, or the other thing. And one of our motivations for focusing on this area, getting back to anonymous tips and rumors and things like that, we recognize that frontline customer service reps are a good source of information. They kind of have their finger on a lot of pulses. They catch wind of a lot of things. So interviewing them indeed did result in some tips and leads for our other sub-investigations. And furthermore, information uncovered in this part of our investigation raised some possible red flags within the customer service student service department itself. Investigative methodology here: to interview stakeholders, to have semi-structured interviews with key personnel in customer service and student support, looking for bottlenecks in service provisions, inefficiencies in procedures, and other areas potentially indicative of fraud or mismanagement in service delivery. To do an audit of transactions, analyze the pattern of calls, emails exchanged, and CRM data pointing towards inefficiency. What does that mean again? Customer relations management, right? Such as unresolved issues raised more than once or a very slow response time. And to check if there's any gap between promises and services provided, the service level agreement. Also, an observational review to follow customer service reps through their operations on the floor with the objective of viewing everyday inefficiencies or systemic failures, looking for understaffing, inadequate workflow, and maybe fraud regarding false representations of service actually performed. To do a document review, once again, looking at escalation procedures and training materials. Also to look at whether the staff is well trained in fraud deterrence and data protection. Customer service operations and internal controls. Take a look at those internal controls over customer inquiries regarding the effectiveness of the CRM system being used, routing of issues, and follow up to ensure service standards are met, and to identify potential fraud risk, misrepresentations, and misbilling. There's more. Interdepartmental communication. Check for a breakdown of communications between departments such as admissions, registrar, etc. I'm going to start skipping through a bit here. Examine analytical procedures. This should be done through forensic testing of service logs and CRM data, looking for anomalies. Interesting one is to use pattern recognition tools. So I guess basically AI, which is starting to be built into a lot of software, to link longer wait times or unresolved tickets with higher student dropout rates. There's a potential connection here with enrollment numbers. An SLA audit. This would involve analyzing service level agreements against performance reports. The focus will fall on the discrepancies between reported performance compared to actual service delivered. Ultimately, evidence needs to be secured through service logs, email, telephone records, using a formal chain of custody, as all evidence should be. Staff will be interviewed in order to verify findings of ineffectiveness or suspected fraud. So, what was uncovered? Possible student attrition due to service delays. Delays are bad enough in responding to students' queries and questions that it could be leading to delays that are so long that students get fed up, maybe. Unmanaged, get fed up and like de-enroll, yeah. Unmanaged resources leading to higher resource utilization at the customer service representative level results in higher operational costs than should be the case, in the form of overtime or even temporary help needing to come on at rush times like the start of a term. It may also be used for asset misappropriation of building services provided that are not utilized. There's a risk here that the reputation of the college will be marred by, a systemically poor student experience. So a few more, recommendations here now. how to try to fix these things. Control to reduce the likelihood of the occurrence of delays and tickets that are never resolved. The base of a modern CRM system with inbuilt fraud detection tools could be implemented too to flag cases showing abnormality in service patterns. And personnel could be increased and the employees cross-trained to handle several issues efficiently. Control to mitigate risks with resource management, establish more stringent service level agreements through performance monitoring. SAL compliance must be audited on a regular basis, and violations should trigger root cause analyses for potential fraud or just negligence, inefficiency, lack of training, what have you. And some monitoring and testing of controls would include real-time dashboards, instituting real-time dashboards which monitor response and resolution times regarding service delivery. That would immediately trigger alerts if the recorded values deviate from the set targets. And periodic forensic audits, routine audits of service logs and call records with highlights of regular inefficiency, or fraud. Periodically test service procedures to ensure standards are met. Performance evaluations, introduce performance evaluations based on the SLAs. I think you get the picture with that one. Now, as I was saying, in the interviews and dealing with the customer service reps, certain things came up. Maybe somebody that was interviewed just decided to vent, and so our team became aware of allegations that two department deans at ABC College had created what may be called fictitious or questionable positions within their own departments. These positions appear to have been designed to funnel money to friends and family who performed little to no work for the college in these new questionable positions. This also motivated us to take a look at wider staff and hiring problems at the college. So there's actually kind of two sub-investigations here, but combine them together to avoid redundancy. Personnel and bureaucratic bloat, investigative methodology here, a preliminary analysis to identify the names of the deans and the sham positions and employees, and to also estimate the financial loss due to this possible malfeasance. To do a record review, audit personnel hired records, look at the job descriptions, at payroll records and the budgets of the departments, analyze financial transactions related to these positions. And of course, to conduct interviews with human resource personnel, departmental personnel, and those who have even those who have been hired for the created positions. Conduct a data analysis, match job descriptions with what has actually been produced, provided, what is the output of these people in these jobs. Analyze email communications, meeting logs, and timesheets to bring up some more leads. And look at organizational charts, human resources records to identify similar instances of questionable new positions and roles being created and filled even outside of the two departments that we initially heard about. So findings and other risks identified. Here's a list of the questionable positions. Associate Head of Research Efficiency. This is within the School of Business. They were supposedly responsible for optimizing research practices, but they showed no actual measurable output. And this position showed overlaps with roles already existing within research departments, such as the faculty research coordinators. There was also the strategic curriculum advisor who allegedly developed innovative course designs. However, no curriculum changes were actually implemented or suggested. Not sure. Curriculum innovation is generally the responsibility of faculty committees and department chairs, and this has no distinct benefit, this new position. Internal communications, just as a note about those first two, internal communications strongly suggested that personal connections between the deans and these two hired individuals exist. So then there was also the student wellness liaison coordinator. This was found under the Department of Organizational Effectiveness, which is a pre-existing legitimate department. This new role claimed to bridge students with external wellness organizations, but there was no evidence of service as such being delivered. Similar duties are present in student services, where wellness advisors also interact directly with students. And also, we found the interdepartmental morale coordinator. This was also found under the Department of Organizational Effectiveness, but we couldn't even find a clear job description, so further investigation is needed with that one. It appears that job descriptions were left intentionally broad and were even totally absent. Payroll records show substantial salaries for those roles, around $120,000 a year. The pay for the identified questionable new hires in total over those past 2 years, depending on when they hired, came out to about $600,000. So this indicates obviously a misallocation of funds that could have been used for other departments such as IT, counseling services, and academic resources. It looks as though these roles are being integrated into existing departmental frameworks, or they are, that are already overstaffed in these instances, with administrative staff exceeding the actual operational requirements. The presence of excessive staffing frequently results in operational inefficiencies. Well, you get it. Another sub investigation that we would have liked to have done, but we didn't have time, would then be to find the departments that don't have enough staff and don't have enough people to do what they need to do. And that could be indirectly tied back to this. Some departments with way too many, with actual bloat, while others are starving, so to speak. So deans and department heads were given too much autonomy in proposing and approving new roles, and thereby were able to bypass HR scrutiny. I'm going to kind of go through this a bit quick here. I'm going to skip through a bit because I think this is going a bit long, but obviously human resources, big problem, failed to identify irregularities. Ultimately, the chief financial officer, in a sense, is responsible for these sorts of budgetary and hiring things. So there's an accountability problem. And problems for ABC College on a broader level, if these sorts of incidents become public, then once again, there's a reputational problem, in addition to the fact that there's so much waste and they're losing money. So recommendations: improve hiring controls, have multiple levels of approval, have everything documented properly, have routine audits, right? Thorough evaluation of staffing, make sure that the jobs that are being created or these new job roles that are being invented actually need to exist. Have stricter disclosure policies regarding conflicts of interest. And it's always nice to have an anonymous reporting system for whistleblowers because, yeah, that's how you get the most leads and find the most fraud. And of course, ethics training would always be nice, make it compulsory, especially in regards to nepotism. Now, the biggest part, the most far-reaching of our investigations or sub-investigations, was to look into the actual enrollment numbers. ABC College is experiencing a high influx of enrollments in many of their programs, making them appear to be in a healthy growth phase. However, before the 10th day of classes in each recent term or semester, the college is receiving many withdrawal from program forms and tuition refund requests. So, method: review deposit statements and general ledger, looking at transactions, along with tracking different methods of funds received. Interview staff and faculty employed in the involved departments. There's a lot of them: Department of Finance and Administration, the Treasurer, the Office of the Registrar. And it's interesting to note, it's a good thing to note, in interviewing people from so many different departments, I don't think it would be possible to interview all of them, not in a month, but probably a good tactic to cast a wide net. So anybody who may actually be a bad actor doesn't get spooked, so to speak, and run to ground and cover their tracks. Examine withdrawal forms and calculate a rough estimate of refunds provided per semester. When possible, try to identify students who may only exist on paper. If we have access, use contact information to try to verify that. Also, finally, take note of method of refunds. Were they cash, debit, credit, e-transfer, check? We received a big tip. We got an anonymous phone call. I guess they saw that we were on campus and they caught wind of what we were doing, our team was doing, and we got a big tip. This caller said they overheard a conversation between colleagues who were planning to meet with individuals in the finance department to discuss how they'll be splitting the refund. The tipster also noticed that the same individuals meet on the same day to discuss a refund issue, which is the start of the semester, which is at the start of the semester for fall, winter, and summer. They repeatedly are meeting. And the tipster decided to do a little bit of investigating on their own and gained access to admission records and found various withdrawal forms submitted very carelessly. Thus, they decided to contact us. Approximately 25% students are withdrawing from their program to receive tuition refunds, which doesn't include administrative fees and whatnot. This rate of withdrawal has resulted in a consistent, or the rate has been consistent across several semesters, and that's a suspicious pattern for it to be so consistently 25% or around there. So, for example, if 150 students are applying to one program with tuition fees of $3,500, that's just over $500,000 for one semester. But if then 25% of those students drop out of the program and they get, or withdraw, sorry, from the program, and they get their refunds, that's $133,000 being refunded and coming out of the school's coffers per semester, and that's just one program. Records indicate that many tuition payments which appeared to be received were in fact never deposited. Huge red flag, gotta look at the books. There are massive discrepancies in the books. So the following individuals appear to be guilty of misconduct. We'll go into it. People at a registration and records specialist, manager of enrollment services, admissions officer, a financial aid officer, a financial aid analyst, and the finance and admin committee and treasurer. Those parties appear to be acting in concert to submit fake admissions and tuition documents, leading to ghost deposits and then costly fraudulent refunds, withdrawals. This is a far-reaching conspiracy that certainly should have been noticed by ABC College's internal auditor. And there's definitely more ins and outs to this subcase, but we can't get to them. Approximately $400,000 per year is being embezzled into faculty, appears to be being embezzled into faculty accounts through checks, e-transfers, cash, with phony withdrawal forms being submitted. So what are our recommendations on this one? Cross-examine all student applications and verify information is valid and accurate, recommending that the college starts working on these things. Also to perform regular audits through a third-party company in addition to internal auditing, limit payment methods through which school receives tuition funds and how it is refunded. Again, ethics training, again, a whistleblower hotline, and implementation of a stronger or clearer hierarchical system which requires sign-offs, approvals of higher-ups in the department when processing large transactions. So, just going to give the summary here and wrap it up. In just one short month, again, limited time, limited resources, our team uncovered numerous problems and indicators of possibly many more. So, in a sense, our investigations raised more questions than answers, as is to be expected within a short time frame. While the college appears to be in a growth phase, the increasing organizational complexity, the complexity of internal communications, verifications and controls, proper document keeping, all of these areas have fallen victim to increased levels of general chaos. So bad actors can take advantage of that sort of thing. It's one of the big risks in a growth phase. And bad practices can then be overlooked or camouflaged or just hidden in the chaos. There are incidents that we uncovered where some methods for control and accountability actually do already exist. Why these checks and balances failed is a larger question to do with the organizational culture at the college. Since issues have been found across several areas and departments, it's reasonable to assume that there is an overarching problem with oversight and governance, as indicated in some of our recommendations. The issues we found cannot be a complete surprise to all members of the board of directors. Many of the things we explored are problems hiding in plain sight. Understanding that above point, maybe this is a risk we're identifying to ourselves as fraud examiners. We are very careful to not present any findings that were not definitively substantiated. So a lot of the things covered in this presentation, we wouldn't actually put on a report to the board of directors. They have to be definitive, well substantiated, especially where larger problems obviously should have been, or obviously could be tied to people higher up in the organization. Note the saying, the fish rots from the head down. Maybe not always true, but so in our limited time with limited access, um, that justifies leaving our ultimate conclusions a little bit tentative in areas. We hope that this will, in turn, motivate the board to have us back for a second round of investigations and maybe even to assist in implementing some of the recommendations that we gave. That's it. Thanks a lot for watching.
Okay, thank you, Group 2. Any questions? I think Group 2, you've done a great job in keeping yourselves gainfully employed. It sounds like there's a part 2 to this investigation.
I thought you might appreciate that. Yeah.
Well done. That's I think the accounting firms are gonna love you guys. Go ahead.
Outside that,
Yeah,
in a real life, like real world investigation,
yeah.
would you want to have a part 2? Because doesn't it seem like your job is incomplete? Kind of question. Competencies.
So this question is not directed to you.
No, it's not. It's not.
So I'll answer that. What I would say is, in an ideal state, you commission an investigation because you don't really know what you're getting into. You just know that something's wrong and you don't know why. The outcome of that investigation may not necessarily yield the perpetrator. And depending on what you're looking at, if you've never looked at it before, you might not like what you find. It might start becoming a bit of a snowball effect. And so that actually isn't an uncommon scenario. I think I've said this to you guys before, like internal fraud doesn't exist, you don't look for it. But if you choose to look for it, you may not like what you find. And so, I think it could happen. If you do a more comprehensive, holistic view across the control environment, which it looks like that's what Group 2 employed, then now you're narrowing down some areas of concern that might require further investigation with a little bit more specificity. And sometimes it might actually be outside of your expertise. Because if you start getting into digital forensics, you start getting into inventory, maybe you start getting into more of the financial statement stuff. As an investigator, you may have to bring in some experts now to go further. In all fairness, because you're working for the company might say, you've given us enough. And they might say, we actually don't want to go further because maybe they don't want to find their perpetrator. Maybe they'll just simply tighten up their controls based on your recommendations and leave it at that. Because the challenge is if they dig further, they might be compelled to charge. They don't want it to become public knowledge if going after police charges. You'd be surprised how many not-for-profit organizations, churches, religious organizations may uncover things like this, especially when it comes to their treasurer or handling of money. And they go down the path far enough to realize something's wrong, but not so far that they're going to press charges. And then they just tighten up their controls and kind of move on. It happens, not-for-profits, soccer clubs, hockey associations. You'll always hear stories internally on this type of stuff, but not so far to the extent that you could definitively say this guy's bad and we charge him, but that person just kind of moved on. So it is what it is. I think that's in Group 2's case, very comprehensive, presentation, lots of great detail. I do like the assessment around the control environments and the way you've taken that. But I will say the outcome of this is exactly as you guys stated. I think I have it in my notes. Raise more questions than answers in some cases. Certainly the organization now is going to have to go back and do some internal analysis and decide, okay, where do we want to go from here? Do we want to invest in some of the recommendations? Do we want to even dig further? Or do we want to just simply tighten up our controls and everybody realizes the gig is up? And that could happen too. So I will also say though, you stay gainfully employed. Because the next question an organization might say is, where do we start? They might say, well, as a matter of fact, I have a agreement here where I could be the expert who implements it for you. And so that could be the next step as well. Okay, great job, group 2. Group 3.